I am happy to have Automotive Seminars as a sponsor for the show. Now, if you're not familiar, Automotive Seminars is a diagnostic technician training company. They've got a website that there'll be a link to in the show notes. And what they offer is top-notch training to technicians like us in the field. I've been taking their training courses for years and have got a ton of benefit out of it. They've got top-notch instructors, John Thornton, Scott Shotton, Scott Manna, and every other month they've got a 2-night course that you can sign up for. Join in, ask questions, and afterwards, you've paid for the course, you can access a recorded version whenever you want. You can rewatch the class 2 years later in case you wanted some details on it. And that is a fantastic feature. So make sure to check out the website to see what courses they have available and what's coming up in the future. This podcast is brought to you by Jarhead Diagnostics. Jarhead Diagnostics manufactures in-house diagnostic equipment and storage solutions, as well as distributes for companies like Pico, ATS, and TopDon. One of my favorite tools that I've bought from Brandon and Jarhead Diag is the case for the U-Scope. If you don't have a U-Scope, you probably should, but if you have one, you got to get one of these 3D printed cases, has a magnet on it, has a full-size BNC lead that you can connect to, and it gets rid of the weak point of that scope, which is the mini BNC connection, which is pretty fragile. This case makes this thing nice and secure and makes it an even better tool than it was. So check out jarheaddiag.com. The link is in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by L1 Automotive Training and Keith Perkins. If you're looking for education on module programming, J2534, EEPROM work, key and immobilizer, electrical diagnostics, or drivability diagnostics, Keith has a website, l1training.com, that's got over 60 hours of training videos on all those subjects and more. When I first started out doing mobile, I utilized Keith's videos on module programming in J2534 in order to get my head wrapped around what I would need for the tooling, the computers, the software setups, what kind of obstacles I would be up against when I'm out there programming modules on cars. And it was a huge benefit to me. And I continue to use the training videos that he has on his website. So I strongly recommend checking out l1training.com. We have got Auto Rescue Tools and Isaac Rodell as a sponsor for this podcast. Hey guys, if you're looking for programming laptops, you want the laptop set up ready to go for programming control modules on vehicles, you need key cutting equipment, you need diagnostic tools, Isaac is your guy. Has all that stuff available for purchase, and the support that he offers along with the purchase has been outstanding. I bought some stuff from him in the past. I got my Dolphin key cutting tool from him several years back. And again, the support has been phenomenal. Helped me out along the way with anything additional I needed to make it work for me. Also, for the month of June 2023, they've got Autel updates for sale. So make sure to check that out as well. Again, that's autorescuetools.com. The link will be in the show notes. Welcome to the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. We're going to explore ways to sharpen our diagnostic skills, find learning resources, and hear from experts in the automotive field. Hey, what's going on, automotive world? Welcome to another episode of the Automotive Diagnostic Podcast. With me, Sean Tipping. I'll be your host for today.
Joining me on the show today is Zack Mcclain. Zack's from Arkansas. He is an educator in the automotive world, been a technician. He's actually working towards starting his own mobile business. We are going to talk about all those things. We actually met at ASTE, or we were acquaintances prior to that, but we had some good conversation at the event and decided, well, why not record it? And that's what you're going to hear in today's episode. We chatted about education in the automotive world and all of what goes into making that happen. Also chat a little bit about mobile businesses and stuff like that. So this was a great chat. I enjoyed talking to Zack, so let's jump right in. So what's going on? What's happening, Zack?
Oh, well, I've had a pretty interesting day. I'm on what I guess I would consider a break from the automotive industry. I've been back from ASTE for a few days now. I've got my business cards, don't have my LLC finished, so I'm trying to go mobile. So I'm in this transitionary phase. I don't know. It's weird. Life's crazy. I got a few side jobs I'm doing, waiting on key machine. Everything's on back order. You know how it goes.
Yes, I do.
Never ending struggle.
I've been waiting on some keys that I ordered since like March or something crazy like that. It's like, all right, well, I guess I'm not getting those anytime soon.
What kind of keys did you order?
I think it was key DIY or something along those lines. It was like a whole case. It came with a bunch of just like ready to go. Some of them had the remote heads to them, and then some of them were just like the transponder heads. But it was like a whole kit, so it kind of have everything. And yeah, it's no fault of anyone I ordered it from. It's everybody's experiencing the same thing right now with the intergalactic back order of, it seems like everything. I had a Ford Focus or Fiesta that was sitting at a shop for, I mean, it's been months since I diagnosed it and since they actually got the module for the TCM just recently to fix it. So everybody's hurting from this.
Glad to hear it's not just a part shortage, it's a key shortage, it's a tool shortage. Everybody's waiting. So I feel less like a loser now. When I tell people, hey, I'm waiting on something, I've actually had 2 or 3 shops call me and, what do they call me for? Keys. Like, hey, man, we need a key.
Of course.
I'm like, oh, of course, the one thing I don't have. So it's just the way it goes.
That's pretty cool, though, going mobile. How did that come about? How did you get to that point?
So life's been wild. My wife worked for a corporation that's actually based here in Arkansas where I live, and she was in a program and it required us to move. So we moved to North Carolina. I was an automotive tech and an automotive educator before that, and we moved to North Carolina. Had to give up teaching. Broke my heart. It's the best job I've ever had was a teacher. So we went there, and I met some amazing techs, some amazing owners. So Lucas Underwood, the ASOG podcast guy, I've been to his shop for a Diag Day. Isaac, everybody knows Isaac. He sells us all the best programming laptops on the market. I actually lived about an hour from Isaac, so I spent a lot of time with him. Ended up actually apprenticing under a locksmith. So I found a locksmith roughly 30 minutes from where I was living. Ended up becoming great friends with him, and he was like, hey, do you want to come learn keys? And I was like, absolutely. So I went mobile because he's a mobile guy. I mean, we would go from customer to customer. We typically served about 50 shops and retail customers. So it was an eye-opening experience because I had traditionally only been in, a facility where I repaired vehicles. Service advisor took tickets to me, and I never dealt with customers. So it was pretty interesting going from that fixed location to mobile. And then, of course, I moved back. Now I'm back home in Arkansas, and I'm like, hey, it's time to go. I want to do that some more.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, that is so valuable that you get to learn right from a locksmith, because I've been trying to figure out this whole key thing, and I'm just fumbling about. I actually got some key stuff from Isaac. I got the Dolphin and the starter kit that he sells, and I mean I'm kind of figuring it out. Like, I feel like I can make most keys, but I still run into stuff, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know. How do I do this? And then I don't know how to say Leshy or Leashy, so I say it both ways every time. I'm like, one of those I think is right. So
potato.
Yeah, exactly. But man, there's a lot of money in that key stuff.
The way that I see it, man, it's our industries are running face forward at each other. The locksmiths they're doing keys as a result of programming. We're doing keys as a result of programming, and everybody's ended up working on the same stuff. So they're learning the programming side of things because the keys require it sometimes, and we're learning the key side of things because programming requires it. So I saw this as like a necessity. I just had to learn it. And thankfully, I was able to make a great connection. I mean, I was talking to my locksmith like 30 minutes ago about a car he's trying to diagnose because he just typically doesn't do diagnostics. He does keys. And what's the story we all hear? Hey man, this car just needs a key. You roll in there, you cut a key, and sure enough, it doesn't need a key. So it's, like I said, we're running head first at each other, and we both have to learn. Locksmiths have to learn the diag side of things and programming, which they already mostly know a lot of that stuff, but we have to learn the key side of things too. So it's been an amazing opportunity.
Yeah. We had a couple locksmiths that attended Mike and Pedro's EPROM class in Vegas, and it was interesting talking to them because they were very unfamiliar with module programming, like just doing something basic like a GM, right? Pretty straightforward and easy. And then the key side of stuff, like I mentioned, I'm a complete beginner at, so the stuff they're just super familiar with. But seeing those two different worlds interact is interesting, but you can't avoid it. That's just the way it is if you're going to go out there and do this stuff. So you're going to be doing programming, diagnostics, and keys for your mobile business?
That's the plan. I am still on the fence. I don't know if I'm going to do retail customers or not. I really want to cater to shops, but since I'm doing not just keys, I think that I can tend to cater to shops. So we'll see how it goes.
I've definitely done some retail customers because mine's kind of like a part-time gig and it started out real small. And the more I progress onwards, the less that I want to have anything to do with it. Even if it's somebody that's cool, I mean, because there's some shady people out there, but even if it's somebody that, isn't going to try to rob me, I still... It always ends up to be some sort of mess somehow or another. And then they have your phone number and then they're calling you for stupid stuff. And so I've been trying to avoid that as much as possible, but I get it when you're starting out, like, hey, I'll take what I can get, right?
Got to start somewhere, they say.
Yeah. And so you got a van all set up and everything?
Not finished setting up. I have a van that I'm going to use. It's an Astro, so I'm going to probably rip some stuff out of it. It used to be a wheelchair van, so it's got like a raised roof already. It's really nice to have that, but then you got to pay the price. You got to take all that equipment out. I got to remove the lift and remove a bunch of accessories that are installed, but I think it's going to work out really well because it's already got that heightened ceiling, and I can mount some shelving in there and put my key machine in it. It's going to be a pretty awesome starter vehicle.
Sure. Well, you don't see too many Astro vans rolling around, at least not up here anyways.
We don't have rust, thankfully, here in Arkansas. You go a little bit further north and you get to Missouri, you can start to see some, but it's really, thankfully, not anywhere near me.
I had a F-150 yesterday that I was doing. The power windows and the power door locks didn't work, and there's a corroded connector in the left kick panel behind the panel, and so I found it. Okay, cool, corrosion, and I looked down and I could see the ground through the floor panel. This is big rust hole. I'm like, oh, I know why this is corroded now. The water just came straight up.
European cars, you got to find where the water gets in, right? That's the running joke.
Right. Well, up here they would rust through, and then the water just drains back out. So problem solved.
Oh man, that's great.
So you were. How long did you teach for?
So I started teaching in August of 2016, and I taught all the way through the beginning of the pandemic, and I think my last days were in May of 2020. So I got out right when the pandemic was just starting. So I didn't get to live through, the hybrid, come in half the day, all that stuff. It was a challenge. I have to say that my institution, I think, did really well whenever we first started. I mean, we used a mixture of different methods to stay in contact with students, but I don't think anybody was prepared, especially not in the trades, man. You can't hand a kid a wrench through a screen and be like, here, go, take this part off that this NATEF list says we have to do. Like, it just doesn't work as much as we wish it would.
Yeah, it was brutal that first spring trying to do everything online. There's no way to make it happen.
Yeah, so me and you actually started teaching about the same time. I started in 2017. Um, how did you get into teaching? What got you there?
So I think we have a similar story in the way that I was an alumnus of my university, and I was actually out in the field one day, and I got a phone call from my old instructors, and he said, "Hey, we're gonna have an opening. Would you be interested in applying?" And ended up talking to him for a little bit and went through the application process. And turns out one of my other instructors was retiring for some health reasons, and it just fell in my lap. I got really lucky, went through the application process, interviewed, and got the position. It was just a blessing. I couldn't have been happier to have that opportunity come to me, and it just kind of happened. I don't know how to describe any other thing that happened.
That's awesome. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. How it just the planets aligned, and I was just in the right place at the right time. Because I have a feeling we're about the same age. I'm 35. How old are you?
Oh man, I hate to talk about age. I'm 26 years old. I'm a real young person. I mean, I got the bald
Okay.
spot, like I'm starting to bald, but that's probably more the stress of working in this industry than my age.
Right.
So
Okay. So, I mean, even more so, and this is something I wanted to ask you about because even because I started when I was 30, and I felt very strange going in there teaching at a younger age. And my first group of students that I had like 3 or 4 guys that were older than me, and I'm walking in there and teaching them, and I'm confident about the material, but it's just it's a weird feeling to be like you're the leader, you're in charge, you're telling everybody, how to do everything, what to do, and here's the deadlines, and they're older than you. It was very strange for me. I don't know if you experienced anything like that.
so every semester, I actually had students that were older than me, and this may sound strange or opposite to your experience, but my older students respected me, never questioned me. They asked questions, but they weren't like, "You're not old enough to know that. How do you know that?" I had
Sure.
the biggest kickback from students that were high school aged, because I actually taught both high school age students and college age students. We had a program where kids would come half a day from their high school, and we just mixed them in. I mean, that's what I did. I went into this program when I was in high school. So surprisingly, it was the younger kids that I got the most, kickback from, probably because of the fact
Okay.
that they're not that much younger than me, big picture wise, So I actually had the opposite.
Gotcha. Well, I will say my older students were always the best students. I mean, they were always, they're just more focused on what they're doing and attention to detail and stuff like that. I never had any issue with any of them. It just felt weird for me to be in that position. But the more that I've done it, because I usually have at least one, if not a couple that are older people going through the program. Now it's just it feels okay. I just remember at the beginning it was strange. Do you remember your first day like in front of a class? I like to ask other
Oh, man.
teachers this.
I remember how nervous I was and how terrible I felt like I did. So that I don't really remember much. I mean, I remember the courses I was teaching, but man, I bet I was just as white as a sheet and shaking, man. Like I don't remember anything except how nervous. It was scary, like standing in front of a group of people. You don't really get taught public speaking skills as an automotive technician. Nobody's like, "Hey, come over here and we're going to talk to 20 customers all at one time about this, lesson plan." Nobody was ever like, "Hey, let's do that." So I just remember being extremely nervous and feeling like I was not good enough, which I think most teachers feel in their first year, maybe 2.
Yeah, you have that imposter syndrome. I know I did, still do some days. But yeah, I was exactly the same. Like I had talked to customers and I had talked to other people, but I never really had any group presentations or public speaking experience. And all of a sudden, there I am up there telling everybody. Yeah, I had how many students did I have that first year? I think I had 16 students the first year. So it is a smaller group. I mean, I know some, professors or instructors have 50 plus, depending on what you're teaching, and that would probably be even worse. But yeah, it doesn't really matter when you're the center of attention. You've got to do a presentation. It was something else those first few weeks. I know I wish I could see it like a recording, but at the same time, I don't know if
I'd be like, shut it off. Shut it off. Yeah.
Yeah. But you kind of find your groove, right? You keep doing it, and it's just like any other skill. You kind of figure it out and get more and more comfortable with it as you go. What would you say for while you were teaching? How many years did you actually do it for?
About 4 years. I think it was 4 years worth of semesters, yeah.
Okay. What was your biggest challenge in teaching automotive?
It's a tough question. Just big picture wise, I think it would be, teaching the curriculum and meeting all the objectives that you had to meet, and then having the students still be a technician at the end of the day. So like the NATEF accreditation, I think it's the ASE Education Foundation nowadays. They have a list of things you have to do. It's like, this is priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, these things you have to do. And let's be realistic, very few people rebuild engines in shops today, right? But you have to teach an engines class. So how do you meet these priorities, but then teach relevant content? So like we talked about engines, for example, at ASTE. In my engines class, I went through a build sheet, and measurements are critical. You have to be able to use measurements, but nobody really rebuilds engines. So when you're doing this, engine rebuild to meet these tasks, I'm harping on measurement. Or we go over how to do like timing belts, because maintenance is far more common than, engine rebuilds, or swapping engines is far more common. So I would go over, like timing belts, doing a timing belt on an engine. So that was like my biggest struggle, was taking students and turning them into technicians and not just meeting task list items. I didn't want it to be like, hey, let's just do this P1. I wanted, hey, why is it critical we know how to do a timing belt? Because that's something you're going to see in a shop. So I'm sorry if that's kind of like a long drawn out answer, but that to me is where I saw the biggest challenge, was making those two meet.
Yeah, it's extremely challenging, because if you do hit everything that you need to on that task list, you're doing a lot of stuff. I mean, that does take up your whole course period, or your whole semester, or whatever, to do, if they hit all of that stuff. But then you look at it, like you said, okay, well, I am, or I have been a real technician out in the field, and okay, well, what about this? What about doing a relative compression test, right? Like, shouldn't we spend some time on understanding that? Shouldn't that be its own course? Maybe we need to talk a little bit about ADAS at some point. Obviously not right at the beginning, but shouldn't that be somewhere in there, because that's something that they're probably going to have to know about? And where do you fit it in, because you've already got all this time allotted to meeting those tasks to be accredited, which of course you want to be accredited so you get funding and the school leaves you alone, all that stuff. But it's tough.
It is. And you hit the nail on the head. Teaching diagnostics is critical, because who cares if you can rebuild an engine if you can't tell that you need a rebuild, or if you can't diagnose correctly, because if it doesn't need a rebuild, now you sold them an engine, now you're really on the hook. So I think we're right there on the same page. Teaching the relevant industry content that they need to know to go out into industry, but then also meeting those tasks. I think that was my challenge, like finding the middle ground to do as much of both as you possibly can.
Yeah, we actually just finished today our engine building course, and so we do. It's an old like early 2000s, late 90s Chevy Cavalier 2.2 liter 4-cylinder. So real basic push rod motor, very simple to take apart and do all the measuring and stuff. And it's very time consuming, like you said, to go through and measure everything. We're using micrometers and dial bore gauges, and I do feel like some of that time, I'm like, boy, we could use this time for something else. I feel it'd be more relevant. On the flip side of it, though, they do get a really good, intricate understanding of how an engine works. So I don't know that I would take the build out if I had the option, because after that, then we progress into mechanical diagnostics, and then we go into other stuff after that. But that fundamental understanding when they got that crankshaft in their hands and they're installing those pistons. I guess just as like, devil's advocate for ASE, there is some benefit to it, but doing like, I'm trying to think of one. I mean, they have questions about like, grinding valves, or there's task list items about like grinding valves and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, how far do we go? How much do they really need to know about the machinist side of things here?
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent for ASE. Like, I'm not trying to discount or discredit what that requirement is. Like, I totally back that. It was just keeping up with the times, I guess. Like, teaching kids relative compression. Maybe that should be one of the, P1 items. But it, things take time. I totally get it. And what's another way to say it? Keeping the industry happy with where you're going. Like, we had advisory board meetings, and when they come in and they see an older engine, they're going to get kind of upset. Ours did, whenever we had a meeting, we had an old 289 V8, ancient carbureted distributor ignition, and they were like, what the heck is that thing doing here? But, kids are kinesthetic learners. That's what I served as a teacher. Almost all of my students were kinesthetic. So if they could hold a spark plug, if they could, take this distributor cap off and watch it spin and see, oh, that's, half the speed of the crank, it helped it click in their head, just like you're talking about with holding. This is a crankshaft. They see it, they touch it. So I think we're both right at the same place. We're talking about the same stuff, just differently.
Yeah, exactly. What was your favorite course to teach of what you had?
So I've gone back and forth between the medium heavy duty industry and the automotive industry, and I taught a diesel course, and I honestly think that that's probably my favorite one to teach because it's what I started my career in. I did medium and heavy duty trucks for a few years when I first started, and I have a real big passion for it. And I had some amazing industry relationships. I built some amazing relationships with some businesses in my area at the school as well, and I had a passion for that course.
Awesome. Yeah, I am. I'm weak on diesel to say the least. We have a diesel program we actually share the shop with, and so I'll go over and talk to that guy anytime I get questions on diesel stuff, because some of our students have the big Ford trucks or whatever, and I'm pretty weak in that area, so it's always nice to have somebody to reach out to. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, actually, now that I asked you that, what my favorite one is. I mean, honestly, so I teach an emissions course, right? Which sounds boring as hell. And I tell all the students that. This sounds boring, but just hang on, because it's also the point where I introduce oxygen sensors, which then goes in the fuel trims, because it all just kind of works together. So I bring that into emissions, and we do air fuel ratios. And the point in the semester where we get into that, it's like we really get into the good stuff, and then we jump off from there and go into computer controls and fuel injection and ignition. But that emissions course, when we sort of give them that baseline of understanding for engine performance, I think that is my favorite part of the year. And who knows if it's for the students, but for teaching wise anyways, that's my favorite.
Awesome. I really have a passion for electrical and engine performance or emissions, but I was never able to teach those two courses. I had some amazing instructors that taught those courses that I worked with, but electrical, I did teach an engine performance class a few times, but electrical is one that I really enjoyed. I never really got to teach that course.
Yeah, so I don't actually teach the electrical course. That's done by another instructor, and he does an awesome job of it. And so when they get to me, they're already expected to know, the basic electrical skills, and then we integrate it into the vehicle systems. Like, okay, you already know how, voltage drop works and current and all this stuff. Well, here's here's an ignition coil, here's a fuel injector. Let's apply that to a real life scenario. But I integrate it so much into almost all of my courses to make sure that we include electrical training and exercises and stuff. And it's so much fun to work through and see the light bulbs come on, real or figuratively, I guess.
Yeah.
But I do honestly enjoy that. But that was the part of the job that I liked the most, I think, was the electrical stuff.
Yeah, that's working on diesels, for example. So almost everything on a truck is bus. It's on a communication bus, and you end up working with modules, inputs, outputs. I mean, there's a lot of electrical in it. I mean, heck, even some after treatment stuff that's a sensors on a bus. So I think that's part of the reason why I enjoyed that so much, is because everything touches some electrical component.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, you gotta have that background, no matter what system of the car you're working on today. And see, I always liked electrical because it was like math. I mean, it is, but like there's rules that have to be followed. It's physical laws, and it doesn't matter what it's on. It has to do a certain thing. It's just a matter of whether you can measure it or assess it correctly. And I like that constant, right? Like, it's not like a suspension noise where who knows what could be going wrong, or who knows what little thing could be causing this squeak. Like, if it's electrical, like, it's gotta work this way. So I don't know. I always just thought it was like, this makes the most sense to me. This should be the easiest thing to figure out on the car. But as I'm sure you know, so many people struggle with it.
Absolutely. I think it's a struggle for everybody until the light bulb goes off. I mean, I remember in electrical class when I was a student, like at first I was like, man, what's this Ohm's law stuff? Like, aren't we here to be, fixing cars? And then after I put two and two together, and I was like, well, everything's electrical, and then started paying attention in class, and it clicks. You just kind of follow it from there. But I think that's another thing. It's like breaking the attitudes. Whenever you get a student that comes in and they're like, I just want to fix cars. And you're like, well, here's reality about fixing cars is everything's electrical. Well, I just want to turn nuts and bolts. That's great. And we need that too. But, getting students excited to learn electrical instead of coming in and be like, oh man, I have to learn this Ohm's law stuff. Because a lot of kids, they're mechanically inclined. They want to work on things with their hands. And then when it comes time to get to electrical class, I think that's probably where we had one of our biggest drop-offs, was when students got into electrical. They're like, it's not for me.
Yeah. What do you think is a good way to get a student excited about electrical?
Man, that's a tough one. I think probably hands-on activities. So actually using real-life cars and bugging them. The problem is there's only so many cars and there's a bunch of students. So I don't know. I'm sure you guys probably had school vehicles that the school owned, and you could go out and do whatever you want to them. But there's so many minutes in a day, and there's only so many kids, and one or two kids diagnose the vehicle, and then, hey man, just so you know, it's a G103, and then the gig's up. You're not going to be able to use that bug. So it's a fine line.
Yeah, today with the group chats and stuff, there's no keeping secrets from any of them, and at least I'm aware of that. But it is a challenge. I'll tell you one method that I'll use, and so this is a life hack for a teacher if you teach, because it not only saves me a ton of prep time, but it also creates a situation where students aren't giving other students the answers. Is you take a group of students, maybe 2 or 3 students, and you give them a car, and you say, hey, you're going to plant this bug on this car. You have to make this system broken in a realistic way. Whether that's a broken wire or whatever, you're going to plant this bug. You're going to do it, so I don't have to do it. And then the other group will do the same thing on a different car. Your goal then, after you've planted this bug, you show me what you've done. You've proved, okay, it's broken in the way that I want it to, which I'm sure as a teacher is not an easy thing to do. Sometimes I break something intentionally. I'm like, oh, that didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So you have to understand the system enough to actually do it. So there's some learning even in just planting the problem. But then they switch groups. and they find out the problem from the other group, and I say, okay, well, whoever's done first wins or whatever, and there's no really winning here, but it's a competition now because they want to stump the other group and they want to figure out the problem before the other one does. So it gets a little bit of competitive nature to it. So that's my method for electrical bugs going forward. I tried it out. It works out fairly well. The only thing is sometimes they really, really break the cars. All of a sudden you got some smoked modules. I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you definitely broke this one. But yeah, that's one way to go about it. But that's going back to what you said, the hands-on, right? Actually doing it. It's not just a diagram. We're actually figuring out a problem, and that like satisfaction that they get from accomplishing or overcoming this problem and getting to the end. It's not for everybody, but I say most people that are in this industry, that gets that fire going. I want to do more of this. I want to solve more problems.
Yeah, totally. One thing I'm really sad that I didn't do more of, and I didn't really make use of until like the last 2 semesters of teaching, was real life case studies. So I worked at a truck rental and leasing facility during the summertime, and anytime we had holidays, I tried to stay in industry. And like I was saying earlier about having, a really good relationship, this was one of those businesses that I partnered with, and I would try to take pictures, take detailed notes, take diagrams and draw on them. And my diesel class, I think, was the only one I got to use this in. I might have used it in another class, but I did a real life case study, and I said, okay, so here's the truck we're working on. Here's the information, customer complaint. What's the first step, guys? And then I would make my class, since we were in a classroom, we weren't actually in the shop, like, what's the first step? Confirm complaint. Once you confirm the complaint, we go to the next slide, and it would be pictures of, here's a diagram of whatever. And I would actually walk through the case study with students. And it seemed like I had much better participation from my students and engagement. They actually would answer questions instead of just, crickets. You're like, hey guys, what's the next step in the diagnostic process? And then crickets. They would actually be engaged and they would be excited, I had some really fun times, the few, instances where I used a case study. So I'm pretty sad that I didn't get to use that more before I had to leave teaching.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I enjoy obviously going to classes that have case studies, but the same thing that you mentioned, like if I'm walking them through a story, and specifically something that I went through, it adds that like personal element to it, and it draws in someone's attention. Like, okay, I want to see where this is going. And then maybe you show them, well, here's where I messed it up. Here's where I made the wrong call or broke something or fried a module or whatever. And it just it's so much better than just reading, service information or a procedure or telling them what to do and not to do. Like, well, here's where I messed up and here's how I progressed. Here's how I figured out the actual problem. I don't know if it's just the personal element or exactly what it is. There's somebody with psychology probably knows the details on that, but it works. It works.
It really does.
And that's kind of why I like to do my mobile thing too, so that I can bring that in a class. Because I mean, you could obviously do that from your personal experience, but I want to try to bring as much relevant material to the classroom as I can. Like this, I just saw this yesterday, guys. Here's what I went through. Here's how I made the bad call. Don't do that.
Yeah, learning from the mistakes. So the case study I used was actually a vehicle that was stuck in D-rate, and it wouldn't read any def fluid level. There was a bunch of problems. It ended up being a missing fuse. So this truck had actually been to a dealer. It had been in our shop and had a lot of time, the shop being the place I was working at part-time, and nobody could figure it out. And the reason I chose this as a case study is because whenever you talk to someone, I think I've actually even heard this in some of the episodes that you've had on before. We've checked all the fuses, right? I love that one. We've checked all the fuses. Did you check for all of them to be there? No, we checked all the ones that are present, and it was a missing fuse. And at the very end, I have a finger right at the open slot where there's no fuse, and then the next slide at the is a fuse in it, and everything's fixed. So I like using those that are relevant, because breaking people of those habits before they get those habits. At least that was something I tried. And after I did that, none of my students ever came to me, hey, we checked all the fuses. They would say, hey, we went to the diagram and found all the fuses that are relevant for this circuit, So it was a good time. And everybody got a good laugh. So
Sure. Yeah, that it is amazing how much when I go out to shops that ends up being the problem. I mean, sometimes it is literally just a popped fuse, and okay, yeah, you probably should have found that, but usually it's when they don't realize a system is tied into another system. But then, the missing fuse. And it's like, why are people just pulling fuses out, not putting them back? That's what I always just like, I don't get it, but it happens all the time.
So I'm a super curious person. I want to know why. The why haunts me at night. If I don't know the why, that's what keeps me up. That, did I torque that drain plug or did I torque that bolt? So when I worked on this vehicle, I actually stuck around because our shop had 2 shifts, and I was training some people during the day, and then at night shift they just did their normal thing. I wasn't there to train the night shift guys because they brought some of them to days for me to train them. So when we were done for that day and I had worked on that truck, I waited around because they told me that particular vehicle had come in at night. So I went out and asked the guys that were working in the shop. I was like, hey, can you give me any more info on that, that Volvo truck? And they were like, oh yeah, the driver, he called us at 9:30 and he couldn't figure out why the truck was broke down. He said that his lights were going out on his trailer, and so he pulled a spare fuse out of the fuse box and stuck it in the lights, and then the truck just wouldn't move. And I was like, we could have a discussion about, customer interviews, talking to customers, getting complaints. So that's a whole nother episode, but it kills me. The simplest stuff can be the biggest problem. So one vehicle with the answer as to where the fuse went.
I don't know. I obviously we have a different mindset than the average motoring public, but sometimes I really question how people just don't make those connections. I did this and now this doesn't happen, but I'm not going to tell you about what I did. Or just my car's broken. How did you not make these connections? But I don't know.
I mean, we could go on for hours, getting good customer complaints. I think I've heard you mention it before, car doesn't run. Okay, well, does it crank and not start? Does it, is it a no crank? We're technicians, so we want these details, but as a customer, consumer, they may not have that same mindset. So getting a really good service writer that knows how to interview customers, that's a skill in and of itself, because I'd probably be the worst service writer ever. Does it crank and not start? What do you mean? So having somebody that's got really good people skills who can interview the customer, that's a superpower.
Dude, that is... When I was a tech, because I would like to talk to the customer as much as possible, because you get that service writer and there's a middleman, you miss stuff. So I'd call up the customer, especially if there's an intermittent issue, right? But that was probably the most difficult thing to get somebody to answer. And it's just because they didn't know, but does it crank or not, right? When it doesn't start, is the engine turning over or not? And they don't know what a starter motor is, and they don't know. And so you're trying to make the noise of the motor. I was like, does it go row, 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 row? And you're like, well, I think so. It's kind of a noise like that. I'm like, oh God. Because it's going to send us in 2 completely different directions, right? No crank or a crank, but you can't even get that information from the customer. I struggled with that. I don't know how many times, but I get it, right? You don't know what a starter is. You don't understand how an engine works. So if somebody's got a good way of asking that question to get a right answer, I would love to hear it.
Me too. Because that's what scares me about this whole retail customer thing, man. Because when do you get calls about keys? People lose them. If they rarely ever want to add a key, I haven't really seen as many added keys as I have all keys lost. But then the third one won't start. Oh, I love those calls. And it just needs a key. So that's what I'm kind of scared of. It won't start. What do you mean it won't start? And then the spiral into confusion begins. So
Yep. For me, it's modules. I get calls from people, just individual people. Hey, I just need you to come program this module for me. Okay, like I said, now I avoid it as much as possible. Before I'd be like, oh, okay, well, did you replace it? Why did you replace it? And it almost always is something else, right? It's almost always something completely unrelated. The module's not the fix. And then I go and I can't communicate to the module, or I program it. It still doesn't start, and they're still upset, and that lack of understanding. But even with shops, I've struggled just getting that basic understanding, and that one's really tough. Like when I can't even explain how a system is broken to the shop, I'm really lost on where to go. I had this with a guy the other day with a knock sensor. So the knock sensor was going off because the engine had a lifter that was just shot, and it was super noisy, right? So you go to accelerate, and you could hear this lifter just and you could watch the scan tool, the knock sensor, pick this thing up, and it would drop the ignition timing, and it's just gutless, right? No acceleration. And I was trying to explain this to the shop, and they're like, so we need to replace the knock sensor. I'm like, no. I was like, you need to fix this lifter. You need to fix the noise, because it's set, because honestly, I shouldn't even have said anything about the knock sensor. I should have just said, fix the lifter, you'll be good. But I was like trying to explain it, like it's setting off the knock sensor, it's picking this up, it's backing off the ignition timing. They couldn't get past their head that like the knock sensor was the problem. They're like, so we just unplug the knock sensor? I was like, well, I don't know, maybe that'll work. But I was like, you need to fix this noise. And these are professionals. Like these are people working on cars. And I don't know how to get past that when I can't even explain it to the professional.
So something, if any of my students listen to this podcast, I'm sure they're going to be like, oh no, he's saying it again. But one thing I really talked about was like symptom versus problem. So are we looking at a symptom, or are we looking at the problem? And sometimes what the customer's complaint is a symptom, not a problem. So I'm sure that symptom was like low power or something along those lines, or there was another symptom, but the problem is the lifter. And getting students to have that mindset of problem, symptom, things can be interrelated, and then them going out into industry hopefully will fix that problem for us, because that's my hope and dream, is that my students are out there like, he said read service info, and like look for problems, not symptoms. I'm sure my students are tired of hearing the two words service information, because I said that all the time. Then symptom versus problem.
That's a really good basic way to look at it, right? And to at least have that, red light, green light in your head, when you can boil it down to something like that and at least apply it to just about everything you're doing, that's a good way to do it. Yeah. Service information has mentioned quite a few times throughout the semester. What do we do in this situation? Refer to service information. Yes, Good job.
Yep. I wouldn't even have to say it. It'd be like, what do we need to do? Service information. If any of my kids are listening, that's what they're screaming at the computer right now. Service information. They got tired of hearing me say that.
But it's true, so it needs to be said. And then even then, sometimes the service information, it doesn't have what you need, or even gives you wrong information. We had one of those just recently we were doing timing belts, and they showed me the page they printed off for this car, and it showed you, here's where you line up the marks. And we did that, and it was out of time. And so we dig and we dig and we dig, and we find out, okay, there's another set of marks, and this is where it's actually supposed to be. I don't think they did anything wrong. I thought they got what they, that's the timing procedure that all data had for that car, but it was wrong. I was like, you know what? This is a really good example for real life, because that can happen. So I was almost kind of glad that they got to struggle through that, and just, at least they have in the back of their mind, like, this can happen.
You mentioned struggle through it, and that reminds me of an episode that I just listened to recently. I think it was Matt Fanslow was talking about like teaching the techs underneath him, and he's like, if I just tell them, they'll never get it. Like they have to go out there and struggle. And like as an educator, I'm on the fence, because I have to get so much done in such a set period of time. But if they don't struggle at all, it feels like the investment. They're not invested in learning until they've gotten their butt kicked and they've spent an hour and it's something stupid. They go, oh man, now I get it. And then it never leaves their brain. It stays there forever.
Well, that first shop period that you were out in the shop with the students, I mean, how bad did you just want to grab that bolt and here, let me show you how to do it? And I struggled with that so much. I'm watching these guys who are very green, and that's how it is. That's why they're there, and they're just the simplest bolt that needs to be threaded, and they're just getting their butts kicked for it. It was really tough for me at first. And I learned by the other instructors that I work with, they really told me, they're like, you got to let them just struggle and get their butt kicked. It has to happen. And it does. Like they have to do that in order to grow and progress, or maybe even figure out it's not for them. Maybe that's an option too, but they got to do that. It's so important. I mean, it's even important for me too. Like when I'm going through this stuff, I'm like, okay, this is super frustrating. I hate this right now, but it's worth it to get my butt kicked. It's going to get me to the next place that I need to be.
I totally agree. At first, probably the first 2 years, like it really was terrible. Like I was like, oh, I want to help them so bad. And then after I started to see the results, like if you let them struggle, and then like a class period or two later, be like, hey, you remember this thing we did in the shop? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I remember that. And then they talk about it, and they understood the concept. Then they understood how the system worked or what they did wrong. And when you see that progression, I was sold on it at that point.
Yep. Sometimes, and I don't know, maybe this is just like a dick move, but they'll want me to do something like that. So I'll show them like, oh, here's how you unclip this fuel line, and then I'll clip it back together. Okay, now you do it. And some of them were like, what the heck? But at least they saw, okay, this is how you do it. Now I want you to do it. But it's important that they do.
So like in our introductory class, like we called it theory and maintenance. So we had that 289 I told you about. And when I taught the 4-stroke cycle, one of the tasks is we would mechanically time the distributor in this 289. So I'd walk them through how to statically time it, put it on number 1, top dead center, compression this many degrees before top dead center, drop the distributor in, and we would walk through it. And then I'd be like, okay, who wants to volunteer? Kid would raise their hand, like, all right, come over here, pull the distributor out, turn the engine over. Here you go. And then, they have to struggle, man. And by the end of the semester, my students could do that procedure in 2 to 5 minutes, depending on, a lot of different factors, whether or not they got it to roll over on compression the first try. They got proficient at it, and it was the struggle. They had to go out there and make it shoot flames out of the top of the carburetor a few times before they figured out. It was a great learning tool, though. The struggle was there. It was out in the open. So.
Yep. That's it's a good lesson for anybody. It even applies to, maybe I'm going in left field here, but like the whole Identifix, silver bullet thing. That's what that is, right? Like if you struggle through and figure it out for yourself, you're going to get your butt kicked. This industry will do that to you, but how much better will you be on the other side? It applies to everybody, no matter what experience level you're at in the automotive industry. So I try to remind myself of that, but obviously, when I'm under the gun, I'm trying to make money. Of course, I go for the silver bullet sometimes too, but I got to at least think about what am I losing out on here if I didn't go through it myself.
Yeah, and I get that. You were at ASTE just like I was. Did you go to the, I think it was like a lunch where they had like the town hall with Carm and my buddy Keith? He's out of Tulsa. He's like 2 hours from me. And there was was it Jim Kokonis, I think was the other guy's name? And they kind of like went back and forth about diagnostic process. And at the end, they were talking about a few different subjects. And Keith brought up like, sometimes it's cheaper. Like this part's $20. I charge this dollar amount per hour. hey, customer, like, do you want to try it? Like, I mean, and he had a valid point. So sometimes those silver bullets, I think there's some validity, but you have to be very careful going down that path. And after that, I actually even talked to Keith. I was like, so Keith, I really like those points, but what if you get a bad part? Because we've all been there, right? You've gotten a part out of the box. With me, I was working at the Chevrolet dealer, and never fails. You get a car come in, a 1.4 turbo GM, and it's going squeal. You go over there and stick your thumb over the little hole, stop squealing. They're valve cover time. Well, I got a valve cover, put a valve cover on, squeal, and I was freaking out. What am I going to do? I didn't diagnose it right. And my mentor at the time, his name's Ronald. He worked at the Chevrolet dealer too. He's like, hey man, go see if they have another valve cover in stock. Went and grabbed a valve cover, slapped it on, fixed. So there's validity to both sides. I mean, I see both being a point. And funny you mentioned like the Identifix top hits. So I beat service information to death, but we used ProDemand. And what do you see? Anything you type into ProDemand, P0300, what do you see? SureTrack.
Oh, yeah.
And I told my students, I was like, if I catch you looking at SureTrack before you've read every piece of description operation, you're going to get real tired of me real quick because we're going to talk for like an hour about how this is not the best way to do it. And they were like, please don't talk, please. We just won't look at SureTrack. We just won't look at it.
Just please shut up.
Yes. So I can see both sides to that argument, but I didn't want myself or my students to fall into that trap of only silver bullets. Because if you become dependent on it, it's one thing. But if you use it in a valid way, like $250 an hour, and this is a really common failure item, or hey, I've done my diagnostic and it seems like 90 times this part's fixed it. Hey, let's go ahead and try it, and we can feel some confidence about it.
Yeah, sometimes that it's just that little bit of reassurance, right? Because you always have that thing in the back of your mind, like, I'm really, really sure this is it, but there's always these possibilities, and then 100 other people had the same thing. I'm like, okay, now I feel better. We can put that part on this car.
Totally with you on that.
Yeah, ASTU was really cool. I so enjoyed that. I met so many cool people. I can't wait for the next event. Obviously I met you there. I think we were friends on Facebook, but it's not the same as meeting somebody in person and you're just like, hey, this is a really cool dude. That's why I reached out to you, have it on the show. Cause I was like, I just enjoyed chatting with you at the show. And I was like, let's do the same thing and record it. But it was so much fun to get to be there with everybody.
Absolutely. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I couldn't be happier to be on the podcast, man. Like, I've listened to this podcast and a few others pretty religiously because I'm an automotive nerd, so it was like, heck yeah, I get to be on the podcast. Told a few of my buddies. So, yeah. I'm really happy to see it's in-person training again because I didn't get to go to virtual Vision, but I had attended Vision like every year for 3 years before that, and like, without in-person training, like I just didn't feel the same. There's something about it, like going and meeting people, being there for the events and like the, social interaction that you get like at lunches, and you get to see these town halls where some people play devil's advocate. I mean, it was cool seeing different perspectives. I mean, I met a guy that is at the scan tool company. I just bought a Top Dawn. I don't know if you've seen the Phoenix Plus, I think is what it is. And I have just inundated these poor people with like, hey, this isn't working. Hey, this.
I don't know where mine is. I have my. Oh, it's over there.
Yeah, mine's in the next room over. And I finally got to meet Charles, this guy that I've just pestered incessantly. Like, hey, Charles, this feature doesn't work. Hey, Charles, this, And it was kind of interesting putting faces to names. I got to meet you. I got to meet a bunch of other people that I'd only spoken to through the internet or through groups. When that lifeline, phone a friend, you get on the groups. And you're like, hey, man, I'm really getting my butt kicked by this problem. And somebody comes in and the white knight saves the day, helps you out. It was very nice to be able to meet some of those people and just be back in person again. Things felt more normal.
Yep, for sure. So I think it went pretty smoothly, and I haven't heard of any super spreader event warnings from it yet. So I think we're in the clear to have another one after this, because I know a lot of people said like, this was testing the waters to see, can we do an in-person event? Is this going to be okay? And hopefully that's the case.
I'm fine. I'm not coughing. I don't have a fever. So let's do some more in-person training. I'm ready.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, cool, man. You got anything else you had on your mind? I hit all my notes.
So the only thing that I really have is when we were at AST, we talked about like industry versus education. And
Okay.
the thing that's always bugged me is it seems like we don't always see the same objectives, or we don't always have the same incentives. So the thing that always drove me crazy was getting industry to have realistic expectations of what student skill level should be, and then I guess fitting my educational goals to meet what the industry needs as a whole. So how do you keep everybody happy, and how do you produce better technicians? And like I said before, I went out and built some relationships with some industry partners, and it worked out really well. I was able to provide students with some OE training, saved them from buying a textbook, and then my industry partners got students who had OE certifications. And like we had talked about before, you send a student out there who's, busted tail, and, they got this 2-year degree, and they go out there and it's like a punch in the face when they're like, oh, you're going to be on the lube rack. And everybody's got to start somewhere, but they're like, why did I go through school? And then you've got students that come back to you, man, they're all discouraged. Like, I worked so hard. And then they feel like they're, I wouldn't say lied to, but they almost feel disappointed, like with where they are.
Yep.
So I was trying to bridge that gap, send students out with credentials on top of the credential of like an associate degree or a certificate, and make industry happy, but at the same time let them know, hey, look, these students, they're entry-level technicians. Like, they're not going to be Mr. Goodwrench turning 100 hours a week. Like, you've got to start somewhere. So like that's been my biggest like frustration, I guess, whenever I was a teacher, was getting industry involved with us, and then getting their expectations set so that they're realistic when a student comes in, and the student is happy when they go to industry, setting their expectations like, hey guys, you're going to start at the bottom, but here, let me give you this leg up, get these factory, certifications through this training program. Hey, and you don't have to buy a textbook. Whenever they heard that, they were sold. They're like, no textbook? Heck yeah, you're the best teacher ever. But I think that was about the only other point that I didn't get to talk about.
Yeah. Well, it is because you have to work it from both ends, like you said, because a student can have a misconception, I mean, especially a younger person, about what they're going to get right out of the gate. Like, oh, I'm just going to, start off making 60, 70 grand right off the bat. And in very few situations that's the case, because they got to work up to it. They've got to put in their time and do what they have to do. There's very few students that can hit the ground running like that, unless it's a specific situation where they have prior experience or there's definitely some outliers. But for the majority of them, they're going to have to put in their time. But at the same time, on the shop side of things, they have to realize that, they're not going to be flat rate monsters right out of school. Very few people do that, except for maybe the outliers. And at the same time, I think industry does need to realize what the students are hoping for, at least. We'll temper their expectations, but they still want this. They still want to be a full-time technician that's doing the cool stuff, if you will, or the important stuff, however you want to phrase that. And so to at least lay out a path for them to get there. And that's one of the things that I've tried to convey to the people that would come into our advisory committee meetings, is like, give them a path. And I was talking to Seth Thorson. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's got some European shops up here, and he does a really great job of that. Like, he lays this out for them, like, hey, you're going to be sweeping the floors here when you start as a student. I can't let you touch these, $200,000 Lamborghinis, but here's your path. Here's how you get there. Here's what you need to do. It's in front of you. So at least they know, they can see in the distance, okay, this is where I need to go. And I think that's an important thing for industry to do for the students that they're getting in. They can't just, one, stick them on a lube rack for 5 years and hope they stick around, or B, throw them to the wolves, produce me 70 hours of flat rate, go. Like, neither of those things work well, but we see it all the time. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not complaining or speaking negatively about any of the industry partners we had. It was just, I felt like I was finally getting into that groove of here's an industry partner, and I worked for them whenever I wasn't teaching. So what would usually end up happening is the students would come in and they'd say, hey, I want to take diesel class. And I'd be like, great news. Well, if you want, you can go work at this place and they will get you started. Heck, some of my students actually completed the training before they ever took my class. So I could, hey, go work on this, running this valve adjustment on this truck. I got to do extra with them because they had already, completed some of that training that I was going to use in class. It worked out. It was like a hand in a glove. Everybody just worked together. And I had really great partners. They told my students like, hey, look, this is not what's important. The school's what's important. As long as you're doing well in school, we're happy to keep you around, but you got to make sure you're taking care of your studies. So it wasn't that, hey man, you got any techs? I'm sure you've had that before. The random business owner's like, hey man, I need techs. And
every day.
It's building that team mentality. They were a team with us, and it just worked out for everybody. It saved my students textbook cost. It got them all of the tasks they had to do. They were able to do using that OE level training, and it was through Navistar. So the medium heavy duty truck world, it seems like they're really doing a great job with getting involved with schools and giving access to those training materials that they give to the dealers, so that my students didn't have to pay for that textbook. That was like a big thing. College is expensive, so every little place where you can save your students some money, they think you're a hero. And it worked out for my partners as well. So I hate to keep hitting that nail on the head, but it was just, I was so happy to find that middle ground. And it's just, I'm really sad I'm not teaching anymore because I really saw that as the future.
Yeah. Well, you obviously are passionate about it. You think you'll eventually get back into it someday?
Man, if I could find a teaching job, I'd be there tomorrow. So if I ever see one open, I'll apply. I mean, you can always form, relationships with people in shops. You can mentor in shops. So just because I'm not, formally in education doesn't mean I can't still do those things. It's just a little sad. One tear moment. Should have never left my teaching job. But
yeah,
hindsight's 20/20, they say.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah, you never know where life's gonna bring you to, and you keep the passion for what you're doing, and you'll get to the right place. That's the way I operate, because I don't always have a plan. I'm going to do what I'm passionate about, and hopefully end up in the right spot doing the right thing.
It's been a lot of fun talking, Sean. I'm really appreciative that you gave me the opportunity to come in and talk to you. And hopefully my rambling isn't the worst episode ever. I tend to ramble, so we'll see.
No, this is good. I felt like I talked too much, but I get excited about this teaching stuff too. So
Me too, man. Totally.
Okay, that's going to do it for today's episode. I want to give Zach one more big thank you for coming on the show and chatting with me. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Also like to thank everybody for listening and all the great feedback I've been getting on the show. I really do appreciate it. So with that all said, let's get out there, start fixing the world one car at a time.